Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I am Kris. It is 4:17 in the morning. I could not sleep too well. So, we're going to get up and do a video. Alright. This is episode 5, yes, of the American Revolution series from History Rebels. Hey! Would you stop? 10 Crucial Days, Battle of Trenton and Princeton, 1776-77. Okay, before we get started, if you can click that thumbs up and subscribe, they're completely free, helps me out. You can donate to the channel through the thanks button. If you donate, request a video, your name sponsors that video. We all know how this works by now, right? But I have to keep saying it because apparently not everyone does. All right, let's get into the video.
Only months after celebrating independence in July 1776, the prospects of the newly created United States of America look desperate. The Continental Army is on the verge of defeat following the failures in Canada and New York, while many see the collapse of the rebel government as imminent. Congress has fled Philadelphia by early December, while inflation and a war-ravaged economy has reduced both their popularity and legitimacy. As Washington's demoralized army crosses the Delaware, the hour has never looked darker for the fledgling nation.
I like that painting.
This video is sponsored by World of Warships. World of Warships distinguished new experience diverse and thanks again to World of Warships for sponsoring our video. As King George III receives news that the British Army has won a series of victories in the 13 colonies, he may have felt both relieved and vindicated. The King had personally selected the generals for the campaign, mixing cautious and sympathetic commanders who can negotiate with aggressive, risk-taking generals who could end the war quickly and bloodily if necessary. The characteristics of these generals reflected the inner turmoil of the 38-year-old king. Like many of the revolutionaries, George was a man of the Enlightenment, and with the limited power of British monarchs, in the lead-up to the war, he'd advocated restraint to the British government in their treatment of the colonies. Seeing himself as the father of the empire, the king desires to be a steady arbiter between the embattled liberal and conservative politics of the age. But the king is also resolute, and once the decision is made by the elected British government to end the rebellion by force, he fully supports the war effort, despite knowing that many of his American subjects will blame him personally and forever see him as a tyrant. In New York and New Jersey, Lord William Howe, as both commander of British forces and peace commissioner, offers a pardon to those that swear allegiance to the king. Thousands take the opportunity, much to the anger of Washington, who considers disarming the increasingly hostile local population as his army retreats south. Like their revolutionary brothers, American loyalists believe they are defending liberty and the rule of law, while accusing the revolutionaries of attempting to create a tyranny and forcing a radical new form of government on the colonies. For 18th century warfare, major battles rarely take place during winter months, and the British Army has begun settling into their winter quarters. General Howe spreads his army thinly throughout New Jersey to protect loyalist sympathizers and to demonstrate his strength to the locals, many of whom have yet to pick a side. The British do not fear an attack of what's left of Washington's army, and many even expect him to soon seek terms with the British. The New York campaign has cost the Continental Army dearly. They have lost over 200 cannon, thousands of muskets, and the army has shrunk from 20,000 men to less than 3,000 as they leave New Brunswick. A very pitiful army to trust the liberties of America, Nathaniel Greene writes. Most of the remaining men have inadequate winter clothing, and their enlistments end on the 31st of December, where many of them will go home. Washington tells his brother that the game is pretty near up, and he has his home in Virginia ready to be evacuated, fearing the worst. Congress, out of desperation, grants Washington sweeping new powers, which include recruiting entire new armies. Many patriots are concerned about the amount of power given to one man and fear that, like in ancient Rome, the new armies will become loyal to their general and not the country. But Washington understands the danger of his near-dictatorial power and informs Congress that, "I shall constantly bear in mind that as the sword was the last resort for the preservation of our liberties, so it ought to be the first thing laid aside when those liberties are firmly established." With the future of the United States resting on the shoulders of Washington and his shrinking army, his best intentions may soon become irrelevant if the situation does not dramatically change. Washington's second-in-command, General Charles Lee, has a force of over 5,000 men further north in New Jersey. In the hope of striking into Howe's rear, Lee has been ignoring Washington's summons to join their forces further south. Lee has been critical of Washington's handling of the war, and his refusal to move south borders on insubordination. On December 12th, a 21-year-old British cavalry officer, Bannister Tarleton, captures General Lee with a scouting party as he writes yet another letter complaining about Washington. Lee is perhaps the most experienced commander in the Continental Army, and his loss is a severe blow.
His loss is a severe blow. I beg to differ. He was insubordinate, refused to do what he was told, was decent leading people into battle, but near the end he was more of a hazard because he was willing to lose to make Washington look bad so that he could put himself in charge. No, it wasn't a loss at all.
Although with Lee out of the way, reinforcements are finally able to move.
To be fair, I don't like him. Washington might feel different. Washington didn't like him either, but Washington might feel different in terms of him being a loss. We won in the end, so I don't see it as a loss. But I think he was... He had experience, but I think he was more interested in himself and the power that he could hold. And if he was put in charge, I believe he would have tried to be a king. He would have tried to be that Napoleon figure where he kept control and power. I just didn't like him. I don't like him.
South and reinforce Washington across the Delaware. In its current state, Washington's army is in no position to defend the capital, Philadelphia. Its loss, combined with further battlefield defeats in 1777, may well convince Congress to seek a negotiated settlement, as the British fully expect.
Oh! I thought this British soldier was holding a gun to Franklin in negotiations. Hey, can we stop? Thank you. Oh, no, it's just a tray. Okay. Whew.
Above all else, to keep the cause alive, Washington must now recruit fresh armies. But uncontested British control across New York and New Jersey makes him look weak, which cripples his ability to attract volunteers. To prove the war is not yet over, he needs to show the people that the Continentals are still in the fight and able to stand toe-to-toe against the British. On the British side of the Delaware River, the most exposed part of the line has been given to 1,500 Hessian mercenaries under Colonel Rall. Rall is well aware that his small numbers make him vulnerable in Trenton, which offers little natural defences. Despite receiving intelligence Washington is planning an attack, he makes no effort to build a strong redoubt in the town, as his officers suggest. Instead, he simply requests reinforcements, which is promptly denied by General Grant. South of the Delaware, Washington has now concentrated some 6,000 soldiers and militia. As perhaps a final roll of the dice, he is devising a complicated plan to firstly push the British out of Trenton and then out of New Jersey altogether. He also hopes to capture the main British supply depot in the region at New Brunswick, which houses stores that his army desperately need, including gunpowder, muskets, and a large war chest of £70,000. Its capture would degrade the British Army's ability to fight in New Jersey and stunt their plans for 1777. For the attack on Trenton, Washington is to take 2,400 men across the Delaware northwest of the town, while the rest of the army is to cross at 3 locations further south. The future of the Revolution now rests on Washington's small army as they prepare to cross the river on Christmas Day, 1776. Despite a snowstorm, at 4 a.m., Washington's army crosses the Delaware in flat-bottomed Durham boats, avoiding large chunks of ice in the freezing temperatures. Unknown to Washington, the other Continental forces have been unable to cross the river due to the harsh conditions, meaning they will have to attack temperatures.
About this picture, I've said it before every other time I've had it on a video, but I think it just bears to be repeated. So that's Washington. This gentleman right here, the only black gentleman on the boat, is representing Billy Lee or William Lee, Washington's little manservant, his slave, but like was everything to Washington. This guy holding the flag represents future 5th President James Monroe. And this gentleman right here is Davy Crockett of is Davy Crockett in the Alamo? I think so. So that, yes. I don't. Anyways, Davy Crockett. I almost said Daniel Boone, but no. But anyways, no, maybe it's not Davy Crockett. Maybe it was. I don't remember now. I completely. My brain isn't working right now. It's early in the morning.
Unknown to Washington, the other Continental forces have been unable to cross the river due to the harsh conditions, meaning they will have to attack Trenton alone. By 6 a.m., the army is advancing silently towards the town. Although many of the men are suffering in the conditions, some with only bloody rags for shoes, morale is upbeat, and the password given to identify friendly forces is victory or death. General Sullivan recently...
I think it was Daniel Boone, because Davy Crockett died around the Mexican-American War, 1840s. So yeah, I think it was Daniel Boone. My fault.
Released by the British, takes his division along the River Road, while General Greene marches on the Pennington Road a mile to the east. Hessian patrols that were sent out from Trenton in the early hours begin returning at 7 a.m, having seen nothing in the dense snow. All is quiet for the Hessians in Trenton as the sun rises on Boxing Day, 1776. At 8 a.m, Sullivan and Greene's forces arrive to the outskirts of town. Greene is the first to meet the Hessian pickets, who open fire at what they initially assume is another Continental raid. But the sheer number of Americans make the Hessians fall back into town, where they take up firing positions in the mostly abandoned houses. They are joined by patrols from the river, who hear the fighting and move north to support. This clears the way for Sullivan's men, who begin advancing into town. Sullivan aims to capture the bridge on the Assunpink Creek and cut off a key line of retreat for the Hessians. At the V at the top end of town, the Hessians are slowly being forced down the road. Colonel Rall is woken, and regimental colours are brought into the street. The 1,500 Hessians begin to pour out of their quarters, many half-dressed, and assemble to the sound of drums and cannon fire. Despite being told that Trenton is being surrounded, Rall does not appreciate the danger his army is in. He also has no designated rally point to organise and assess the situation, which could have been the defensible Mill Hill to the south of town. Rall's intuition is to attack, and he believes a strong push will break the Colonials. The Hessians form columns and march up the road towards Greene's men. In the freezing temperatures, the majority of muskets cannot fire, and troops on both sides must turn to the bayonet. But the Continentals have by now unlimbered cannon on the roads and pour decimating fire into the Hessians, whose attack first falters and then collapses under torrential fire. As they retreat south, they run into elements of Sullivan's force, and both armies become locked in brutal house-to-house fighting. As much as the Hessians try to resist, their situation in town is bleak, and the majority of the men start to retreat to an orchard just outside of town to regroup. By this point, Sullivan has taken possession of the bridge, and Rao's options are fast running out. He first attempts to break out towards the Princeton road, but this is checked by the German battalion of the Continental Army. He next resolves to retake the town. The band plays music to boost dwindling morale, and the ranks move forward to attack. The Hessians initially make progress and start to push their way back into Trenton. The Continentals are not idle, however, and welcome them back in every direction as the battle once again descends into a bloody melee. Despite the bravery of the Hessians, they do not have the numbers. Soon Raoul orders a retreat back to the orchard, and in the confusion he is shot from his horse and falls to the ground, mortally wounded. Heavily outnumbered, with no commander or way of retreat, the Hessians can do no more. By 9 AM, only an hour after the attack had started, the garrison at Trenton capitulates. In a stunning victory, Washington has captured almost 900 bemused Hessians, with another 100 dead or wounded, all for the price of 2 dead from exposure to the cold. In the following days, newspapers fill with gossip and rumours of the battle. General Howe, after confirming the reports are true, prepares a response and sends the aggressive General Cornwallis south to recover the initiative with 5,500 men. Washington knows that the British will now seek a general engagement and concentrates his 5,000 men and 40 howitzers in Trenton. But many of his officers are sceptical. With their backs to the river, there is no retreat if they are defeated, which could have catastrophic implications for the Continental Army. It seemed to many that too much was on the line, but Washington's disposition may not be all that it seemed. As both armies prepare for battle, Washington faces another crisis. Enlistments for a large number of his men are ending on the 31st of December, and he must convince them to stay if his winter campaign is to continue. He gathers his troops and offers a $10 bounty to extend their service. Drums roll, but no one steps forward to accept. Minutes pass. Washington wheels his horse and addresses the men once more. "My brave fellows, you have done all I asked you to do, and more than could be reasonably expected. But your country is at stake, your wives, your houses, and all that you hold dear. If you will consent to stay 1 month longer, you will render that service to the cause of liberty and to your country, which you can probably never do under any other circumstance." The drums beat once more, and this time men slowly begin to step forward, one by one, growing in number until almost every man joins. Washington has kept his army intact. Late on the 1st of January, 1777, Cornwallis arrives in Princeton. Some of his senior officers urge him to split his force and envelop Washington from 2 directions. But Cornwallis, sure of a victory, opts instead for an uncomplicated direct attack and marches south to meet Washington. He leaves a small force in Princeton and marches with 5,500 regulars and 28 field pieces. Washington has purposely given the impression to his officers and any listening loyalist spies that he plans to make a stand at Trenton. He places 1,000 men along the road south, with orders to slow any British advance and ensure they arrive at Trenton too late in the day to attack his main force strung out along the Assunpink Creek. On the morning of the 2nd of January, 1777, Continental pickets begin harassing Cornwallis's advancing troops. All going well, the British should arrive at Trenton not long after midday. but along the route they are being continuously ambushed and are forced, again and again, to pause and form battle lines to drive off American attacks. A thaw in the temperature, combined with overnight rains, has also muddied the roads, at times slowing the march to a crawl. Washington's men have done their job, and the British only reached the outskirts of town at 3 p.m. with only 2 hours of daylight left. A reverse of the previous Battle of Trenton follows, as the British methodically recapture the town and almost cut off American defenders in the process. Although late in the day, the British are now in a good position to attack. One American commander writes, "The next hour, or less, would decide whether we should be independent states or conquered rebels." The British make 3 probing attacks against the bridge. They are met each time with cannon and grape shot and driven back with heavy casualties. With darkness fast approaching, Cornwallis can either order a general attack now or wait for the morning. Against the advice of his officers, his men are told to stand down for the evening. Cornwallis thinks that Washington has blundered and that he is now trapped north of the Delaware. With no easy way to recross the river, Cornwallis believes that given a full day of battle tomorrow, he will be able to defeat and then capture the entire Continental Army. But unknowingly to Cornwallis, he is exactly where Washington wants him to be. Now that the main British force has been drawn in, Washington springs to action. At 1 a.m, the majority of the Continental Army starts to march silently out of camp along a small road unknown to the British. Washington has no intention of risking everything on a battle in Trenton, and instead plans to once again attack an isolated and numerically inferior British outpost. The Continentals are headed for Princeton. The British garrison in the
Gotta love how confident they are. Oh, we'll get them in the morning, don't worry about it.
town numbers some 1,200 men, and they are led by Colonel Charles Marhood. By 7 a.m, they have started their march to reinforce Cornwallis at Trenton, and have no reason to suspect Washington is nearby. As the sun begins to rise, the British start to spot other units in the distance. At first they are assumed to be Loyalist or Hessian formations, but by 8 a.m, Marhood recognizes the danger. He orders his column to quickly reverse direction and move back towards Princeton. Thanks to their rigorous training, Marhood is able to rapidly deploy his regulars for battle, and the two forces are soon exchanging volley fire across the fields. In the heat of battle, Marhood orders a bayonet charge and Mercer's formation is put to flight. A number of surrounding militia units get caught up in the retreat, putting the American center in disarray. During the melee, General Mercer and a number of his senior officers are surrounded, and after refusing to surrender, they are bayoneted to death by British troops who believe they've killed Washington. Back in Trenton, the main British army wakes to the sound of guns at Princeton. Cornwallis knows immediately that he has been outfoxed, but being 5 hours march away, he is powerless to help Colonel Marhood. More worryingly for Cornwallis, Washington is now in between him and the British Army's all-important supply depot at New Brunswick, and he quickly prepares to march north. With Mercer's shattered formation in the center, Washington gallops across the field to rally troops and lead fresh brigades forward. His presence inspires wavering soldiers and keeps them in the fight, but many of his men are also anxious, seeing their chief in the thick of the fighting. The British are now being slowly squeezed into an orchard by the growing number of Continental troops. They hold on for as long as they can, but accurate cannon fire begins to break Marhood's men, who soon start to scatter in a desperate bid to escape. As they retreat, Marhood rallies what men he can and attempts to break out towards Trenton. They charge American lines and successfully break through, crossing the bridge and moving south towards Cornwallis. The battle is effectively over, and remaining British troops, barricaded inside Princeton's college halls, are surrounded and forced to surrender. Washington has smashed a second British outpost, killing, wounding, and capturing between 300 and 450 enemy troops in the process. Not long after the battle, Washington receives word that Cornwallis is fast approaching Princeton. He has an important decision to make. Although New Brunswick is within reach and morale is high, the health and strength of his men is concerning. Further grueling winter marches and battles in enemy territory could seriously jeopardize his exhausted army. Following the advice of his senior officers, he instead decides to march to winter quarters in Morristown and allow his men a well-earned rest. For the British, whose leaders had only days earlier believed the rebellion to be almost over, are now finally realizing that their opponents cannot be underestimated if they are ever to be defeated. Many now have a new respect, and perhaps even fear, towards the elusive General Washington. The battles, although small in scale, are hugely impactful on the war. Instead of being the last charge of a dying rebellion, as history may have remembered it, Washington's winter offensive takes back the initiative and breathes new life and belief into the cause. The British are forced out of most of New Jersey, and countless numbers across the 13 colonies are galvanized by the victories, gained by a small band of determined men and their daring general. Thank you for watching our series.
That's pretty good. I like the way they tell the story. It's definitely good. Okay. Well, this is part 5. Part 6 that'll be a 2-parter. But we're not there yet. I hope you enjoyed this. I do. I love this stuff. So, yeah, these 2 days, or these 2 battles, really kind of changed everything. Got the reenlistments and kind of gave hope to the struggling colonists. Okay. All right, well, I'm going to end this here. Until next time, have a good day, have a good night.